Have you ever played a story and after you played the story, you were like, oh my god, this is the best thing ever? And then after 3 days later, you start to realize there's some issues with it? Well, I've just finished a few days ago the Archon Quest of Fontaine Act 5. And initially, I gave it a score of 9.7 out of 10. But then after a few days of thinking, there were some things that I didn't like about it. I dropped it down to 9 out of 10. And the reason why is going to be explained in this video. So in this video, I am going to talk about the things that I really enjoyed about the Archon Quest, probably the best one so far. But also there were some problems, so I just wanted to talk about it and just give my general thoughts on the overall concept and the feelings I got from Archon Quest Chapter 5. So after finishing the Archon Quest, I got a comment or a question in regards to, did the Traveler actually do anything at all in Fontaine? And I thought about it for a while, and then I came to a conclusion. You know what? The Traveler actually didn't do anything. Yes, the Traveler took part in the trial and everything, but realistically, they didn't really have any impact. Now, that's not a bad thing, and there's a reason why I believe that's the case. Is because the whole idea of Fontaine's Archon Quest was that we are watching from the outside. We're an observer. As Furina puts it, she even said the word witness. We're essentially observer, or maybe like even just a jury if we think about the idea of the whole court and the trial, even though we took part in actual defending and all that stuff. Overall, that idea kind of sat with me, and I thought to myself, maybe the Traveler didn't do anything, but it made sense in the overall scope of the Fontaine Archon Quest and the concept around it. So I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I thought it was a good explanation on whether the Traveler actually did anything or not. And I thought that was pretty fantastic that if that's what they were intending. Now, one of the great things about this Archon Quest was the emotional ride of this crazy sadness that was happening throughout the entirety of it. For example, in the very beginning, we had the situation with the flood in Poisson, and it really showcased another character development arc for Navia, just because she was trying her best to make sure that everybody was okay, but no matter how much she tried, the way it's described or the way that is emphasized in the game is that fate cannot be changed, essentially, right? So no matter how much she tries, she will always fall short of the prophecy that was to occur, and then she started losing people around her and the bodyguards, which is very sad. But overall, that was a good emotional. They just drop you into the deep end immediately, and I thought that was pretty crazy, which was good. Now, that wasn't just like a random, like, oh, feel bad for her kind of thing. The whole reason that it even existed was because of a plot device that they were planning for people being Oceanids, or we eventually find out the Fontanians were Oceanids from the beginning, and that was showcased later when she fell into the Primordial Sea, but she was saved ultimately. But the people that dissolved essentially were Oceanids that ended up protecting her. So it was a good plot device. It was a good emotional ride of losing, but then they would come back to help save her. And it also mirrors the situation with the Focalors and the Hydro Archon and Furina later in the story. So it was a good piece that they set up for much later in a very mirroring aspects of it. So I thought that was amazing. I thought that was really cool. Now, speaking of character development for Furina, I actually really like this character from the beginning, but a lot of people also did not like her because she was either too stubborn or she was just annoying. And I get the reason why, but the thing is, in this Archon Quest, for some reason, in the first half where she was being stubborn again, they really did a good job showcasing just how, for the lack of a better term, annoying she could be because of the situation that she was in. And for the first time, I feel like, okay, that she's going like a little bit too overboard. I really like her, but I wonder why that reason is, that she's just being so conflicting, or what's the better word for it? Stubborn, just very stubborn, extremely stubborn. And we, of course, find out later why that is through the whole explanation of like what she had to go through over 500 years. And in retrospect, even though she was being extremely stubborn throughout the entirety of Fontaine and the first half of this Archon Quest, in hindsight, it really gives you a reason. It's for 500 years, she just had to be completely silent just because she wanted to save the people of Fontanian and just avoid the prophecy of the flood that was going to happen. On one hand, you can see it kind of like a cliche, but the reason why it's not a cliche is because I remember there's a moment where Furina gets basically put in this magical box that eventually gets teleported to the courtroom. And there was a moment at the end, right before the box opened, the traveler really asks Furina to just lessen the burden, tell her everything, right? And we don't get to see what that result was, like whether she was going to tell us something or not until much later. And as it turns out, when we're going through that like samsara cycle of what she had to go through, what Furina had to go through for 500 years, there was a moment where what if Furina actually said the last piece within the box before it opened? And as it turns out, regardless of how much struggle and pain she was in, she would still not tell the traveler what would happen. And that just goes to, and that's kind of the reason why I don't think it's cliche, because if it was, she would have said it and, oh, kumbaya, let's help her, I'm gonna actually try to help you feel better. It wasn't like that. It was like, I can't tell you still, and no matter what, even thinking back on the 500 years of pain, I'm still not going to tell you. And that's how strong her will was, just to protect the people of Fontaine. And that just by itself was really, I'm glad that they did it like that, because if it was the other way, it would be pretty boring, honestly. But just because she still had that ridiculous mental fortitude of like, I won't tell you anything. That was a good choice, in my opinion, I think, for the storytelling, and just really put a nail on the coffin, or really emphasizes just how much Furina was dedicated to her mission, her goal that was given to her by Focalors. Now, before we get to what I really felt at the end of the Archon quest, there are a few things that I really thought was cool that they showcased throughout the story, and that has to do with the representation of the biblical references that they had in the game. I mean, Furina walks on water. She's basically Jesus, but it goes way deeper than that, because if you think about the whole storytelling of this Archon quest, or even Fontaine in general, it all stemmed from what they would call a sin, right? Sin of Focalors, the original sin. And in a biblical reference, Furina is literally Jesus, but ultimately, Focalors and Furina together as a Hydra Archon, they had to sacrifice themselves for the sins. And that's indicative of Jesus' crucifixion. And I thought that was really cool that they mirrored it in this way. There's even a reference of the Noah's Ark, starting of the new beginning, due to the sins of the people. There's also a reference to Jonah getting eaten by a whale, and we essentially get eaten by a whale too at the end with the narwhal situation. And that was also all going back to the humanity sin, essentially. There's a lot of references, and I thought it was really cool just knowing that these things do exist in terms of sin in general, and it matches the story of Fontaine really well. And I thought that was amazing. That was well done and well portrayed. Now, as for Focalors' execution, of course, I need to talk about it. It was rough. I won't lie. But there was another reason why I felt so sad during the live stream. If you were there, you kind of probably see my reaction for it. So obviously, if you guys know me, I played Honkai Impact 3rd. There's a reason why I'm bringing Honkai Impact 3rd up, because after playing through so many chapters and the storytelling of Hoyoverse, I kind of got calloused in terms of like feeling sad, because they constantly bombard you with depression. So I kind of was thinking, even a while back, I don't know if you remember during the Chasm when it first released, and it was pretty sad with the Hilichurls turning it, like humans turning into Hilichurls, and we find that out and all that stuff. Even then, I thought it was sad, but it wasn't as sad as the things that I've experienced through Honkai Impact 3rd. So I always wonder to myself, is Genshin ever gonna go down that route of like really hitting home with sadness and depression? And I didn't really have faith in it, because Genshin Impact is a casual game, and I don't think they would ever do that. Even if it did, it won't hit as hard as how I was used to going through the depression arc of Honkai Impact 3rd. And when it happened, I remember sitting in silence and thinking to myself, there was always one thing that was missing in Genshin Impact storytelling where things were supposed to be said, and it was the presentation of it. The presentation of this sad arc of Focalors' execution was immaculate, as in there was this one shot where she was dancing right before her execution, and the camera pans towards the sword that follows her, right? And you know what's going to happen, but you're sitting there, what if? It's just the execution of the visuals and this audio that they executed so well that actually it kind of broke me inside. And usually a lot of the times, even though the story can be sad, if you add visuals and audios to it to match perfectly, you kind of die inside. I kind of died inside. That was well done. I really enjoyed it, aside from it being depressing. But I always thought, like, you know, these Genshin Impact people, they don't know how much I felt of a Honkai Impact. There's pain. I wonder if they'll ever experience it. And then when it happened, I was like, okay, you know what? I don't want to wish this on anybody anymore. This is way too sad. And I thought that was pretty funny. I was like, wow, okay. Good job, Hoyoverse. But please, no more. I'm done. That kind of a feeling. It was good. It was good. Overall, it was amazing. Now, obviously, that might not be the cup of tea for everyone because this is a casual game and you're supposed to have fun playing the game. But personally, a well-crafted story and well-telling of the story, even if it's sad or depressing, if it's well done, it's I don't want to say enjoyable. It's appreciable. Is that the word? I appreciate it. Now, with that said, there are a few things that I thought after thinking for a few days that they could have explained better or executed better. First one was there was a point in the Archon quest where it started to feel a bit dragging. And if you remember, there was a whole sequence with they talked about trapping Furina to get her to the courtroom. But then out of nowhere, we're like on this random journey of just constantly running around and eating and just exploring the town for like a good chunk. In hindsight, I know the reason why, because they had to like set up all the pieces in the background and, you know, dig a tunnel essentially. But because I didn't have the context at the time, I was like, what's going on here? I'm confused. I'm lost. It feels like it's dragging. Now, the saving grace for that was that during this process, we learned more about, you know, the Hexen Circle, Mona's master. We meet Mona, and there's like a little bit of a character development in that regard, talking to N and how N gives us another hint that, you know, fate and all that thing that she was directing us, guiding us essentially. So there was that to kind of help it alleviate the problem of the dragging. But it's only dragging because I didn't know what the context was until it was explained later. But that was kind of strange. I thought maybe, I don't know how, but maybe they could have done a better job. So there was that. Another thing was Nouvelette with this weird hydro hand power that can decipher the murals. Maybe I'm dumb, or maybe I wasn't paying attention. I don't remember that being explained. How it felt random. And maybe I'm dumb. If you know anything that can like hint to it in hindsight on why he was able to do such a thing, let me know in the comments below. Maybe they'll do it in the future of the game, but I don't think they will. That was a little bit weird. I thought, okay, he's doing some crazy dragon power. Why? I don't know. And then the last thing that I felt was really, I didn't like. It's the boss fight against the narwhal, the whale. In the story, I was super hyped. It's like, finally, we get to fight this whale. It's huge. It's insane. Completely from another world. And then maybe my characters are over leveled. Maybe they toned down the difficulty of the fight. Maybe if we look at it into lore aspect, Nouvelette was with us, so it was supposed to be like not hard. But that fight ended so fast. There was like a little bit of gimmicks with the arc mechanism, but it was kind of boring, to be honest. The visuals was fantastic. The soundtrack that they played after we get eaten by the whale, that was out of this world. But the fight itself was pretty simple. In retrospect, if you look at top down, like in hindsight, I was like, okay, I was super hyped, but that's it. It was kind of that feeling. And then after I finished the Archon quest, just so I can farm Furina's materials for talents, I went and fought the whale again, like outside of the story. It was a little better, but it was still the same thing. It was a little better as in it was longer, but maybe my characters are overleveled. I don't think they are. I don't even think they're particularly strong, but it was kind of like, honestly, I prefer the fight against Scaramouche's big mecha god thing more. I don't know. Maybe they had a little bit more gimmicks. But I thought that was weird, the whole whale fight. But regardless of those things, overall, I thought the story was well done. It was really enjoyable. But I do want to talk about something very important in regards to Furina, So I don't know if this is good or bad, but if you really think about it, after Furina came into existence or became a human by Focalors, the first thing that Furina remembers is the discussion between herself and Focalors. And Focalors essentially gives her a task, a mission, a journey of unknown period of time that she needs to go through this. But the thing that like really made me sad was the fact that after everything was said and done with and the prophecy happened, but the Fontaine was saved, and Nouvelet ultimately tells Furina what happened between Nouvelet and Focalors' discussion. It's kind of like Furina never really gets closure from Focalors. She only hears the result from Nouvelet. So in a way, like, maybe this is kind of weird, but if you look at it as a Furina being the child and Focalors being the mom, in a weird symbology, I guess, she never sees her again. And sure, Furina is hopefully happy now and kind of free from all the burden and mission that she had to go through, but she never really gets closure from Focalors. And that was kind of sad. It was really sad. And the worst part was there was a moment in the story after the trial where Furina was deemed guilty and she completely shuts down. Obviously, in hindsight, everything's okay, so it's fine. But at that moment, I was wondering, dang, she's just sitting there completely dead inside for like the whole time that the whale breaks into the courtroom and starts wreaking havoc. And I was kind of thinking about it, it's like, she's just sitting there. But if you think about it, when she was deemed guilty at that moment, that 500 years of pain she had to go through, this is Furina's perspective, was deemed completely a failure. So, like, really think about that for a second. She spent so much time, so much effort, just keeping everything to herself. And then when she was deemed guilty in the courtroom, that was the end, and she completely failed their mission. And I can see why, in Furina's perspective at that time, that was so heartbreaking and sad, and that's why she completely shuts down, doesn't say a word, and just sits there dead inside. That was really sad. On top of not getting closure from Focalors directly. It's just depressing. But because it's so depressing, the story was good. And that was... Honestly, this is probably the best Archon quest I've played so far. I know there's a recency bias included this. Nothing feels cliche. Everything feels like it has a reason. I felt very emotionally attached to everything that was going on. And I'll give it a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10. Hopefully they'll do a better job with the small things that I nitpicked earlier. But we'll see. Now I think about it, Focalors doesn't even give an apology to Furina. I think that's pretty messed up. I know the reason why Focalors did what she did. I don't want to call her selfish, but I thought that was pretty messed up. I mean, obviously, maybe Nouvelet apologized in her stead, or maybe Focalors asked. I think they might have said that in the Archon quest. And then there was like a little monologue. It's like Focalors saying, "You're free now. Essentially, good work. You're free to do whatever you want." But not really like a direct apology from Focalors herself to Furina. And I thought that was messed up. That was so messed up. Oh, that was so messed up. So was this Archon quest good? Yes. The story was deep. A lot of things were explained. A lot of foreshadowing and plot devices that gets bookended well. Presentation was great. The visuals, the character development, and the whole thing with depression leading into hope, the idea of hope, is a classic Hoyoverse storytelling. So overall, besides few nitpick things that I mentioned, it was good. 9 out of 10. And that's just my personal opinion. As for the ending with Nouvelet and Skirk's discussion regarding the Gnosis, the third ascender, I don't really know too much of what I think about it just yet. I know there's a name that Skirk also dropped that was very important. I forgot the name. If you can remind me in the comments, let me know. But I don't know what to think of it at this exact moment because it's very confusing. It's not confusing. It's just lack of information that makes me feel lost. I'm going to have to think about it more in the future. And we'll probably have a discussion about this in one of my theory live streams. So if you want to partake in that, make sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you next time.